Hello, Olaf. You just finished your speech at the epic stage of the third Agile Serbia Conference. So, can you share your impression of the conference with us?
In a word, wow. What specifically wow is the absolutely flawless organization and care. Just as an example, when I arrived in my hotel, I found a bag with a map and city guide to Belgrade with chocolate, with like a sheet that said, this is where you need to be on which day, and this is the telephone number of the person who's going to pick you up, and this is the phone number of me when you need to reach me for anything. And yeah, when you look at everything here, it's just so beautifully organized, so many people. It's lovely. The topics are interesting. Apparently, Jelena has some pattern of challenging every speaker into something that they've never done before, but that turns out to be really valuable to the conference. At least I've talked to 3 different speakers who had that experience, like myself. And and the talk I just had, I felt welcomed. This community is amazing. I think you Serbian people have a great advantage to, for instance, Germans, but also French and English and other people who have worked and been at conferences, is that you have this habit of socializing a lot before, during, and after the event. So the networking level here is so much higher. I've been approached by so many people. Some of them I knew from the leadership courses, but also some others. And yeah, that's great.
I'm very glad to hear that, really. I saw on your LinkedIn profile one interesting statement. There are thousands of great coaches worldwide, and there is only one trust artist. So, can you share with us who is the trust artist? Can you explain a bit that term?
Yes, so the reason I came up with this term is that when I became independent, I was reading lots of advice and asking a lot of people, and I was obviously a bit afraid. And one thing that I read was a Gaping Void cartoon which said, don't be the best at what you do, be the only one who does what you do. And I thought that's a really good idea, but it was also a high challenge of how do I find out what only I can do. And at the time we were working with a company where somehow we brought the word trust into the conversation and into people's consciousness. And I remember, for instance, there was a board in the hallway where all the development teams' rooms were, and that board was the Scrum Masters board, and they had all the things they were doing with the Kanban thing, and like lots of tasks. And the day after we had started this trust conversations, they had pulled away all these tasks. They had totally erased the board and just wrote down, "Teams, we trust you." And that was just one example of many. I remember a conversation with the management, the C-level, and some Scrum Masters and developers, and we did a check-in at the beginning. I don't remember what the topic was, something about the transformation. And one of the Scrum Masters said in his check-in, I have just realized that I want to collaborate with the CEO, he said the name but not CEO, and I just realized that I don't really trust him. And I don't know how that will work out, but I think it's better to say it than not say it. And I step back and observe how this works, because maybe I regain my trust when I see how he engages with you today in this meeting. And I thought, wow, what have we made possible that people reflect like this and open up and say so honest things? And it was really beneficial that he said that, because the CEO was touched and he said, oh, I want you to trust me, etc. So became kind of apparent that trust was an interesting thing in what I did, or a key thing in my influence. And the other thing I had read was a Seth Godin book in which he said that art, or an artist, is somebody who creates an experience that gives people the option to transform. And I thought, wow, that's an interesting perspective on art, and it's what I do, so I'm the trust artist. That's how the name happened. And then I checked the domain, it was free, so I registered the domain and I said, okay, I'm the trust artist now, it's a new thing, I invented it. And then I started figuring out, how does trust actually work? It's not just Olaf coming in and magically trust happens. It needs to be, I'm an engineer, I'm a physicist, a philosopher, I need to understand things. So I read lots of books about the brain and about social dynamics, and worked with interesting people to figure out how does that trust stuff work. And it brought also the right clients to me. So one thing I figured out in hindsight was calling myself a trust artist was a brilliant move to keep every company away from me that I wouldn't have wanted to work with anyway. So people who booked me wanted something different. So that's how that came about and how it worked.
That's great, and definitely it's the unique term. Once before you told me that leadership is not about the position nor a role.
Yes.
It's an activity. So can you explain to a wider audience a bit that activity, leadership?
Well, I think we have adults in organizations. We don't have kids. And even kids lead their life with more or less intention. The people we hire into organizations, they buy or build houses, they run families, they raise kids, they engage in charities or wherever. So they do lots of responsible things. And at work, we expect them to just follow somebody else's lead. That's stupid. That's a waste of potential. And leadership is the same everywhere. If you lead your life, if you lead your family, you lead your project, you lead your organizations, the skills you need, the awareness you need to have to take responsibility for something, to follow through, to help others help you, or to co-create something together, to set a context, to develop the relationships, and to help something grow in whatever you are leading. And we have people with these skills, with these talents, and the future requires organizations to have leadership on all levels. It doesn't suffice if only the people at the top, if only the managers lead. We need everybody to lead. We need everybody to take responsibility.
Okay. What is the key difference between an agile leader and just a leader?
There's no difference. Agile leadership is not a term. Agile, so in our classes we always collect a list of leadership principles, and the flip chart is titled Agile Leadership Principles. In Serbia we cross out the Agile and say Serbian Leadership Principles. In other countries I just cross out the Agile and write Good Leadership Principles so that people understand it. When you look at leadership courses in the 1950s, they've been doing the same things, right? Lead people, let people grow, hire people who are better than you. All of these things have been in the leadership development domain for decades. There's nothing new. What I think is agile in leadership is that we improve as leaders. So agile to me is deliberate improvement. Mm-hmm. So agile leadership, if we want to use that term, is leadership that consciously improves. Mm-hmm. So when I know what kind of difference I want to make, and I know how I'm showing up, and I have an awareness of how my inner world and the things I think and believe, how they affect how I'm showing up, and how that affects the results I'm getting, then I can start improving. And I can say, okay, maybe if I actually listen to my people, that makes a difference. Maybe then I understand what they want, mm-hmm. and maybe then we can co-create together instead of me just telling them what to do. Things like that. So it's not about a style, it's not that kind of leadership is old and bad, and that kind of leadership is agile and good. I don't believe in that.
It's not about the term.
I believe that agility is something that is, and you don't need to call it agile. It's just about getting better with.
Definitely. Thank you. And finally, what is your message to the Serbian IT community?
Be proud. Be proud and confident. The current market situation in Europe and in the world leads to you being in a position where you deliver stuff that other people have defined, that other people have developed, and you find yourself in a kind of less influential position in the organizations. That's going to change because all of the market stuff is changing, and the salaries are getting higher, and the economics that make that possible, this kind of oppression or exploitation, that will stop in a few years. And when I look at this culture, at the social dynamics that you are able to create so much faster than Germans, for instance, use that. You can be so much more agile in terms of networked organizations, using the relationships, using that co-creative energy for what Bob talked about in the morning, right? This VUCA world requires people like you much more than it requires the typical Western business people that we have now. Use that chance and make something of it.
Thank you very much. This was a great interview. Thank you.
You're welcome.